Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with jazz pianist Emmet Cohen. He just released 2017's Master's Legacy with Jimmy Cobb and has great stories about working with the drum master. He started on the keys at the age of 3 and would go on to become an alumnus of the YoungArts Foundation that is in the business of creative writing, theater, dance, visual arts, cinematography, music, voice, and jazz. He learned a lot there. He also has a master's degree from the Manhattan School of Music, and amongst many other things these days, he is the leader of the Emmet Cohen Trio. So get to know this deeply inquisitive cat and dig this interview, my friends.
Let me get an idea. This is kind of a dual question. I want to know what's going on with you lately, but I really dig your 2017 album, Master's Legacy with Jimmy Cobb. It's a great listen. So talk to me about this album and kind of what's been going on with you lately.
I think that something that's very important that's overlooked in history and also in from the younger generation is seeking out the knowledge of the older generation. So you look around what's going on in the country now. It's, people didn't really learn the lessons from the past. I don't think.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the most important things that jazz teaches us is, the rich history and the rich tradition and all the things that the jazz masters, like, even someone like Charlie Parker, where you're from, what he sacrificed and what he went through and how he struggled and how that affected his music and his creativity and how that thrived in the time that he lived in. And then, trying to understand that and then help us to do the same in our time period, whatever that means for us. So, I decided that there's this huge generational gap, between the jazz masters and the people in my generation. I'm in my 20s, and I decided that I was going to take on a large-scale project to try to shrink some of that and try to bridge that gap and focus on the intergenerational transference of knowledge between the jazz masters and each of the generations. So I have known Jimmy Cobb for a little while, and I contacted him and asked him if he'd like to do a record and a project and an interview, and in the process, I really got to know him as a human being, and he's almost become like a grandfather to me. We live in Harlem. He lives just a few blocks away, and sometimes we'll go out to lunch and talk about music, or, he'll talk about Miles Davis or playing with Billie Holiday, Charlie Parker. This is information that you can't, it's a feeling you can't get from a book or a documentary or it's really something you get just from person to person. This is an oral tradition. And so we got together and we made a record. And I tried to feature some of the music he's played in the past and compose a little bit for him and celebrate, this man, Jimmy Cobb.
It's interesting. I had the pleasure and honor of interviewing him at one point. I remember asking him about Kind of Blue, which he's gotten that question a million times. And his response was, we had no idea what we were doing. We just got into a room. Miles expected things out of all of us. We were all there for a reason, and we were at the top of our game, and we just made an album. And that's the thing I think that always blows me away, because that's the seminal album. That's the one that clicked on every jazz light switch in the universe in that proverbial way. And for a guy like Jimmy that was in that room to just kind of have that feeling that it was a day, man, and it turned into magic,
Yeah, I think that's part of what I'm talking about. It's you don't really see history going in the moment. It's hard to zoom out when you're in it and say, okay, what is this going to mean for our time? They also didn't really have a choice. Miles was the band leader. If they wanted to play on the session, then they showed up for the session and took the offer. If not, then you get somebody else. And that affected all of the other opportunities that he had at the time, and it's just the time that it was in, and Miles, had a broader vision for sound, and he was a producer, especially later in his career, he would pick the great musicians and pair them together and put bands together in such a way that it would create a new feeling and a new style and a new energy and a new excitement.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was a beautiful time. The one thing about your life is you started out on the keys at 3. You're no stranger to the piano. but I didn't see where you were born and raised.
Well, I was born in Miami, Florida. Started playing early Suzuki piano down there, and at age 11, I moved to New Jersey, actually, rather, but right outside of New York City in Montclair, New Jersey. So I was around the metropolitan area. Started studying classical piano. Well, I had been taking classical piano, but I started studying more seriously at the Manhattan School of Music. They have a pre-college division, so I took every Saturday from age 12 to 18. Went there and took classical piano lessons, and discovered jazz on a similar path, parallel to the classical music. After my father took me to see great pianists like Monty Alexander or Ahmad Jamal or Ray Charles, Jimmy Smith. I got the chance to see a lot of really great pianists, and Marcus Roberts, and something I was really interested in and started to explore.
You've been at this for a long time. You obviously have seen some great performers in your life, learned a lot of things, probably from just being on the piano bench and doing your thing, but you've also have a master's degree from the Manhattan School, a bachelor's from Miami's Frost School. What have you learned in a formal environment? What has the formal environment taught you about music?
Well, you pick up bits and pieces from everyone. I think the most important, a couple of really important things about formal education. One, it is the people you're surrounded with. So a large part of your education is the other students that are in class with you, that are around you, that are older than you. When I was an undergrad at University of Miami, there were grad students that had been doing this 10 years more than me, that I had a chance to be around and learn from their experiences. Also, teachers. You have to find a teacher that you really connect with, and that you can learn from. I was lucky at the University of Miami to have a teacher and a mentor. His name is Shelley Berg, and he's a great pianist and a great teacher and a great mentor. And I say there's not really such thing as a good teacher and a bad teacher. It's just who you connect with and who inspires you to work, and who understands you, and who provides that giant mirror for you to look into and see yourself and see how you can grow and change and develop. So he was a really great teacher. I think formal education is all about finding one or two or three great teachers who you connect with and who inspire you, and who might even be able to provide connections or work in the real world when the formal education is done. So I graduated from University of Miami, and I applied to go to the Manhattan School of Music, where I had gone to pre-college as a teenager, and I went to get my master's there. And that was another lesson, because I was around people like Dave Liebman, and just really submerged in the New York scene. So for me, that education was more about the location. So I was out every night, checking out music, seeing how it related to stuff in school. But you have to make choices. There's not time to study everything. There's not time to learn about all the things that may interest you. So, another great lesson you learn in formal situation is discipline and how to make those choices for yourself, based on what's important to you and what interests you and what you see your path being.
What jazz albums in your life, in your education and becoming a jazz musician, were really huge for you, that taught you a lot, that you loved?
Well, I've listened to a lot of music. When I first got started, I was playing clarinet and saxophone in middle school, and trying to figure out Charlie Parker solos and Sonny Stitt solos. And, bebop really spoke to me. Those guys, Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, trying to understand that language and how it fit together. It was like a big puzzle to me. And I really tried to get inside that. And as I grew, I started expanding out and saying, okay, who did Bud Powell and Thelonious Monk influence? Well, they influenced Barry Harris and they influenced Cedar Walton. These are guys I got to go and I got to see. So then I, checking those guys out. But who influenced Thelonious Monk and Bud Powell? Okay, that was Fats Waller, Willie the Lion Smith, Art Tatum, James P. Johnson, Jelly Roll Morton, Earl Father Hines. So going back in the lineage, that's just piano too. We can go other instruments. Lionel Hampton, Duke Ellington, his orchestra, Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins. These are the guys that influenced Charlie Parker and Bud Powell and my first loves. Oscar Peterson got me into it with the clarity and the feeling and the joy in his music. Figuring out who he liked. He loved Art Tatum. He loved Hank Jones. So I think, for me, it's like this giant puzzle and giant timeline that I've checked out. Close to all the great pianists and all the great musicians of the time. Obviously, I left so many out. Doing that for each of the instruments and really getting inside everyone's unique personality and learning about their lives, helps you to learn about choices, and what kind of choices these men made musically and personally, and what they were doing in their time period. A lot of them during the Depression, a lot of them during World War I or II. It's really a complete study of history, and I find that a lot of times, especially in jazz, people disregard a lot of that history, whereas in art history or study of architecture or dance or film, people really get into the history and why people made certain choices. And so I try to treat, our art form like that, like a complete study of history. And then, basically the further back you go in the past to learn, to see how things develop, ultimately the farther in the future you'll be able to push it. So that's my belief. And, it's been more of a study outside of formal education. But I know we started talking about albums and stuff like that, but, I've checked out so much music, it's hard to pinpoint, one or two albums, but those are some of my favorites starting out.
I love the trajectory of where that answer went. It's very true. It's what I try to do. What I try to do with Neon Jazz is really put jazz in a historical context with history, because you don't. History tends to be a carousel, and it doesn't have to be. It can be a vibrant line going forward, but you have to know where it started and who made that propulsion happen. And so I dig it. Speaking of propulsion and art, you are an alumnus of the YoungArts Foundation, which is a very cool set of programs with writing and theater, dance, visual arts, cinematography, music, voice, jazz. How big was this in your life?
It's been really big. It's been more than an organization. It's actually become family to me. I started out as a student in that organization, and they put together a conglomerate combo from high school musicians by audition, by video submission, and I got picked to be in this combo, and I was in a wonderful combo with all of the great musicians of my generation, and I think that's the most important thing that organization provided early on was, I was in a band with these other really great musicians. It was Mark Whitfield Jr., who plays drums. Now it's Kenny Garrett and Orrin Evans and Kurt Rosenwinkel. On bass was Kate Davis, who is a singer and kind of a pop star, now pretty famous, beautiful voice. On saxophone is this man named Adam Larson, who made 4 albums already. We went to get our masters together, and he's out there doing everything. There's Benny Benack on trumpet, who I'm still really good friends with, and who's playing with Christian McBride and all these different people. And this guitarist named Armand Hirsch, who toured the world, Bobby McFerrin, and played in Hank Jones's last band. So what it really does is it takes all of the great artists. That's just jazz, but it's all the different disciplines of art, and put everyone together. And I think together people come up with greater ideas and greater development and growth than on their own. So that's what it did for me as in my formative years. It took me and put me around all of these people. Since then, I've turned the corner and started teaching and curating weeks for the students. So I'll put together, the week for the young students now sometimes, and, take them to the recording studio, something I wish we got to do, or bring them around Jimmy Heath or Barry Harris. Just came down to Miami last season and spent a day with the students, and, just to be around the jazz masters and create this opportunity for them and direct shows with creative writers and musicians and cinematographers. And so it's really, just a really great outlet for creativity.
Over your career, you have your trio. You've done a lot of work with a lot of people like Kurt Elling and Billy Hart. We talked about, Jimmy Heath, and there's all kinds of things that are constantly going on with you musically. How do you feel about your career where you're at today? What you've done, who you've played with, and just your general vibe?
Well, I consider myself extremely lucky. Totally honest, candid way. There's not that many opportunities out there. And I've had a chance to play with so many great musicians in my generation and each generation. We're making a record with Ron Carter for Volume 2 of the Masters Legacy series. And that'll be taking place in Vancouver in June. So I'm looking forward to that. I've been asked to join a new band by Christian McBride, which is just piano, bass, and guitar in the style of Nat King Cole and Ahmad Jamal, Oscar Peterson. So really looking forward to that. We start rehearsal in about a week for that. So I've been writing music and stuff for the new band. I have so many things going on all the time, and I've been really lucky to also have my own trio and, write for that and grow that and been touring that lately. It's hard work and you have to be diligent about it every day. But I'm extremely lucky and I feel great about everything that's going on.
And being lucky and with all these opportunities that's translated into awards and fellowships, and the list is pretty long of things that you've been awarded. Fellowships for the Cole Porter, Thelonious Monk, piano competition in 2011. Was there an award that you got that surprised you the most? Not your favorite one, but one that you got that you were like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
I don't know if there's such a surprising award. All those competitions are very nerve-wracking, and I've done a lot of them, and they all kind of blend together in a weird way. I'd say for all the teaching I do, college really comes up heavy. Getting scholarships to go to school, that's the biggest award you could get. It may cost you $140,000 or something like that to go to school for 4 years, and even more if you want a higher ed degree. I feel like, the most important award I got was, scholarships to go to school, because that's really the biggest encouragement and the largest breeding ground for a young musician growing in this time. So definitely those, awards. I think of awards as opportunities too, and opportunities to play with guys like Kurt Elling or Christian McBride or Jimmy Heath or Ron Carter, or alongside Barry Harris. Those that to me is the biggest award that I can get. All the competitions are cool, but they blend together at the end of the day.
So you mentioned seeing Monty Alexander in some really good shows throughout your life, but if you could get kind of fantastical and get into a time machine and go back in time and see a show, where would you go? Who would you want to see?
That's such a loaded question. We can take this in so many directions. It might be really cool to go see, a Sacred Palestrina concert, or a huge choir in the medieval times, or watch Bach play, or watch Liszt play classical piano, or as far as jazz goes, get to see Louis Armstrong play the trumpet and get to feel his energy in person. It's something I haven't got to see. I haven't gotten to see Louis Armstrong or John Coltrane or Cannonball or any of these guys with huge presence and personalities. It's one thing to watch videos and one thing to listen to it on record. Guys like Roy Eldridge, Dizzy Gillespie. I'd love to experience some of them in person, but if I had to be narrowed down to one, I would say Louis Armstrong, because he was the first pioneer after Jelly Roll Morton, really, of the idiom and the art form, and he was the first true original.
Absolutely. So, why do you love jazz?
Well, I think it's something that has endless possibility, and it's something that can also teach you how to live other parts of your life. I think that's something that that people who don't understand jazz haven't figured out yet, or think they don't understand jazz. That the lessons that you learn in jazz, at least for me anyway, I can only speak from my personal standpoint. The lessons that it teaches you are respect, humility, the ability to work with others. It teaches you about emotions. It teaches you about happiness and joy, but also teaches you about dark times and it gets you into all those moods. And I think one of the great lessons learned from the masters like Roy Eldridge or Dizzy or Duke Ellington or Wayne Shorter or any of those guys, that if you listen carefully to their recordings or to them play, you get this feeling of hope. And I think that is one of the great messages of jazz, love and hope. And, those things are infinite. And, the message of jazz, when you listen to Louis Armstrong play, as all this stuff is going on, and the blues, he's playing the blues, and it can be sad, but at the end of the day, the message is things are going to be all right. That's it. Jazz has helped a lot of people in a lot of different time periods get through hard times, get through whatever it is they're dealing with. And I think for me, that's why I love it so much, because it's very powerful and very spiritual, and people turn to it in their hard times, like they would turn to religion, or like they would turn to family, or it's always going to be there for you. And I always used to go to Dizzy's club and hear this guy named Todd Barkin. He said, if you take care of the music will take care of you. And I found that to be true thus far.
Perfect. So everything comes down to this. Everyone has a version of who you are, your family, your friends, those that watch you live, that buy your music. But at the end of the day, when you wake up and you face the world, who do you think you are?
That's a difficult question. You're always perceived in a certain way, and you always think of yourself in a certain way. But, I think that this music is one of the other things that I didn't mention before, is that it teaches you how to focus on other people. And part of the way that I conceive music is largely thinking about other people. And I think that's one of the great gifts that it also teaches you. And, it's easy to get caught up in, how do I sound? What am I playing? What is this piece I wrote? But once you start to kind of let go of the I part of it and start thinking, what can I play to make everyone else sound better? Or what is this audience going to want to hear? What will uplift them? What will make them forget about all the hardships they went through in their day or their week? How can I, take them out of that for a minute and show them, this alternate world? And so I think of myself as someone that's able to affect others in a positive way, and just try to make the world a little bit of a better place each and every day through my actions and my music.
Beautiful. I love that. That's a great way to leave everything off. Emmet, thank you for taking some time opening up about your music and your world. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, thank you very much. All right, stay in touch, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Emmet for his time, honesty, and all of those great stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.